everybody, once again to the Not a Rabbi podcast, the podcast where we go ahead and hopefully and try to discover new understandings of Jewish traditions. As always, we are going to start going ahead with some gratitude and start with some gratitude. And first off, I'd like to thank Logan for the intro music that you hear if you're listening to this not live. Second of all, we'd like to thank our live studio audience that we have. Third of all, I'd like to thank the members or the moderators of the unofficial Fifth Column podcast Discord server for once again allowing me to do what I do when I do it here in their voice channel. So thank you very much to all of them, thar people. Hopefully an interesting show today. First thing I wanted to do was get into, actually remind everybody, if you like this podcast, you could obviously subscribe, and you can go ahead and do that in the podcast app of your choice, podcast feed of your choice, however you want to do it. You just look up Not a Rabbi. I am there. You could subscribe, continuously download. That would be lovely. Second of all, if you're on YouTube and you're watching it there, you obviously hit the like algorithm, blah, blah, blah. You know the deal with that. I hate people that do that all the time. Third, feel free to sign up so you never miss an episode. And you could join in on the comments and any other writing that I may do for the Not a Rabbi podcast, which is called the Newsletter. And you could do that at notarabbi.substack.com. You could even comment as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get into this a little bit today. First thing I wanted to do was I was going through my notes for other previous things that I had in my podcast folder, and I realized I went ahead and I missed some feedback that a listener had provided me with, and I never answered it. So I'm going to first of all, I'd like to apologize to that individual. They know who they are, and I want to now go ahead and try to answer this a little bit here. And this will create a little bit of a segue into the second topic that I want to discuss, and which sort of leads a segue into the third. So it's a segue of segues. Anyway, here we go. The comment is, I was thinking the other day about different words used in semi-formal contexts. And he says his grandfather went to temple, not to synagogue, and he never heard the word shul growing up. And that's an interesting question, interesting comment here. So the couple of things to just touch base on, I think, a little bit. Most non-observant Jews, right? So if you are of the people that are not not religious, when I don't like titles, but we'll just use them because they're convenient in this case. We'll talk about Orthodox. If you're not Orthodox, then generally the word that you would use for the place of worship would be the temple. Now, as Orthodox Jews do not use that word temple because that sort of connotates that temple, whatever building that is, that temple, right, it replaces that of the main temple, which was in New Jerusalem, and there was, the first temple was built. That was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and then the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Following that came the Bar Kokhba revolts, I should say. And so, we don't want to use the word temple in that aspect. So generally the word that would be used would be the word, in English, it would be the word synagogue. Now, what is the, I should take a look at this, and let's take just a curiosity here. What is the etymology, M-O-L-O-G-Y, of the word synagogue? We don't want to confuse etymology with entomology, because people will probably be bugged out by that. Okay, so interesting. The word synagogue is a Greek word which means assembly or gathering. And again, this is just an interesting thing in and of itself. There is a lot of use of Greek in the Talmud, and so this is not surprising that after the destruction of the first temple, that the word would be used in that instance. So that's where the word synagogue came from. Now, the word shul. The word shul is a Yiddish term, I guess you would say, for the synagogue. So, especially if this happened in Eastern Europe, that people came over came to Eastern Europe. They started speaking Yiddish. That developed. Maybe that's worth an episode in and of itself about the development of Yiddish. But it went ahead and they started, instead of using the word synagogue or something like that, it became shul. Now, what's very interesting, actually, we should ask, what about shul? So that's how I believe it is. It's a Yiddish word, yes. And so that is, mostly those of us that are Ashkenormative, as we like to say, would use the word shul as just short for the word synagogue. And so there it is. Now, so that's why a lot of Orthodox Jews, or most Orthodox Jews, do not use the word temple, and we would use the word shul. Now, what's also very interesting, again, this is something I discovered a year or two ago. The word, there are a lot of small shuls, small synagogues, and those are generally called shtibels. Now, why are they called shtibels? What did that come from? So apparently, and I don't know how it happened, but apparently the Yiddish word for home is shtib, and that's generally where these small synagogues were. They were in the shtib. They were in the house, in the person's house. So therefore, it became known as a shtibel. So you learn something new every day. It's something interesting, but that would be the answer to the individual's question in terms of why not the word synagogue or and only the word temple. It could be that his grandfather was not religious. I mean, I would presume that was the case based on what I know and the way it's being explained here in the document or in the question. I don't know how much of an observance there was in Europe before they came over, so this would probably be what he was used to. The other question that he asks is another choice of words here between yarmulke and kippah, which both mean the same things. I have an episode on yarmulkes and kippahs. Maybe I'll link to that in the show notes if you guys behave well. Anyhow, we go ahead. Yarmulkes are, I guess, the Yiddish word, but it's really not a Yiddish word because I think I discussed this in the episode then, which was that yarmulke is a short for the two words, which is Yora Malka, fear of the king. And so it became this contraction to yarmulke. Kippah is basically just like a hat or something like that you would put on your head, and that's the Hebrew word for it. It generally will go along the lines of I hate to use these. I hate generalizations, so I apologize if I'm hesitating to use these terms, but that's just how I roll. But there's a difference between, using the word kippah versus yarmulke would be basically if you are more on the ultra-Orthodox side of things, although that's not necessarily true, or on the more modern Orthodox side of things. Again, I don't like those titles, but sometimes you have to use them because that's the easiest way to do things. Anyhow, that was the feedback that we had over there. Any questions coming up? Let's see. Yes, I used to do that finger thing. Here's the shul, here's the shtibel, open up the doors and see all the people. Yes, I used to do that as well. Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful memory. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, but that's, I guess technically that wouldn't work because the original one, which is in Christian, is here is the church, here is the steeple, and that's just a part of the church. A shul and a steeple would be technically could be two separate, two separate things. If you want to get really pedantic about it. Any other comments? So we don't see kippah in popular culture because of the lack of Orthodox people in popular culture. Are you talking about people wearing them? Using the word? Probably. I mean, most people know it as, I guess in America, most non-Jews would know it as a yarmulke maybe, or a beanie. So that's where it would go. And again, it's just because of the more Ashkenormative way that we have become, and a lot of the words that are used came over with us from Eastern Europe or Western Europe, if you are German or the like, and so therefore those words just became common use here in America. Okay. Also, I did want to point out here, and there are no coincidences, like I always like to say, and the fact that I discovered this question really is very fitting, because Tuesday, 2 days ago, on the 13th of August this year, 2024, and on Tuesday, it was the Jewish date, the 9th of Av, which is a tremendously sad day because that is the day that both temples were destroyed. So finding this and to talk about it, definitely no coincidences in this world. It's an amazing thing. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was, since we were talking about temples, is this, and I'm gonna just throw one article in here, because the other two are paywall blocked, which do the same kind of thing. I'm gonna throw that into the chat, and there will be a link to this in the show notes as well if you want to watch it. And I'm sure that friends of mine will give me some heat for this, and hey, that's okay. Anyhow. The topic that we are going on here is the topic of the Temple Mount. And should you go onto the Temple Mount, or should people go onto the Temple Mount? Now, this generally comes up twice a year, this big debate. Time one is right now, or was 2 days ago when it was the 9th of Av, and a lot of Jews want to try to go up onto the Temple Mount, and where obviously a mosque is right now, and that annoys the Arab population, not so surprisingly. And this was being led by one of the members of Knesset, Ben Gvir is his last name. I don't even know what his first name is. Everyone calls him Ben Gvir. I don't know. Which means son of man, actually, in Hebrew, which is, he probably Hebraicized it at some point in time. Anyhow, so Itmar, thank you. Itmar Ben Gvir. But nobody ever uses his first name. It's very funny, right? Nobody uses his first name. They just call him Ben Gvir. So anyway, so he and several others went up onto the Temple Mount on Tuesday. Again, I think that there is a legitimate desire to do so. Oh, so before I get into this spiel, let me give you the second time that this always becomes a major issue, which is right before Passover. The reason that it's right before Passover it happens is because people would like to do the Paschal sacrifice on the Temple Mount. Some technicalities with that. You don't necessarily need the temple to do that. You don't have to be completely pure to do that. Again, I think that's getting I know my wife hates this expression, but it's getting farther into the weeds than I think is for this program, so I'm not going to do that. But anyhow, he did this, and people were not, obviously the Arabs were not very happy, and right now, as we know what's going on in the Middle East, it's a stupid political stunt. I'll just, again, I think I'm going to get called, people are not going to be happy with this, but I'll live with that. That's fine. It's a stupid political stunt, I think. But also, I think in a matter of Jewish law, this is problematic as well. Because, and again, there's something that we don't understand necessarily, which is because we don't live with it on a day in, day out basis as they did when the temple was in existence, and it should be rebuilt speedily in our days. But there's a concept of impurity, and it's a spiritual type of thing where, and the Bible talks about a lot of it, or what will make you impure, what will not make you impure, how do things become impure, and the like. The Bible, or not the Bible, but the Talmud goes into this as well, and obviously expounds upon what the Bible mentions. And so we are all in a state of impurity. Suffice it to say, and for just making it simple, we're born in a hospital, most of us, and being born in a hospital means that there is a morgue in the hospital. So therefore, you are in a building with dead people. That is going to make you impure. And how that goes ahead and gets taken care of, take a look in the Bible for that. However, there is a major problem with going up onto the Temple Mount, and if you would even go ahead and actually enter into the area where the temple, where the temple was, you're not allowed to do that if you're impure. You are not allowed to go into the temple if you're impure. So you are running serious risks of violating such a commandment, because that, since the temple has been destroyed, that ground is what we believe is sacrosanct, and it's holy, and you're not allowed to go in if you're in an impure state. So this is a major problem. Now, there are probably, and as we know from my podcast episode, 2 Jews, 3 Opinions, there is probably a minority, if not a minority, I would probably say, of people that would say you're allowed to go of rabbis that would say you're allowed to go into the Temple Mount. But a majority of the rabbis do not believe so. There's actually an organization called the Temple Organization, I believe, that is trying to really reinvigorate things as well. And again, this is an issue within Israeli Orthodox culture, I guess you could say, where if you are part of the religious Zionists, you're going to believe this more, and you're going to want to go onto the mount. You would say that you might be able to say that you could go onto the mount, although I don't think a majority of them do believe that. But there is that subset that do. I would say most of the Orthodox or just the religious Jews in Israel do not believe that you should go onto the Temple Mount, which I guess I'm on that team, for lack of a better word. But this is a major, major problem. And so, it's just something that was interesting, and something that I don't think was a politically wise move, nor do I think it was a religiously wise move. And there are, I'm not going to get into the Israeli politics side of things on this, because I don't know Israeli politics in the least. So I'm going to not talk about that at all. Any questions from the chat? While the questions are coming in, I did want to point out something very interesting, which is Maimonides, whom I've mentioned before, believes that Christianity is a polytheistic religion versus Islam, which he believes is a monotheistic religion. So technically, you would be and based on how mosques are, you would actually be able to walk into a mosque versus being able to walk into a church. Interesting aside. Assuming it wasn't an issue with the Arabs, how would Orthodox Jews be able to be part of rebuilding the temple? Hold on to that. Polytheistic because of the Trinity? Yes, that is correct. I know the other theories about the Trinity, how it's not really a Trinity. I understand that. I'm not getting involved in that. I'm just saying that. Okay, so now let's get back to that first question here. Assuming that it wasn't an issue with the Arabs, how would Orthodox Jews be able to be part of the rebuilding of the temple? Great question. That would not be able to happen. You didn't think that Christians would view it as being polytheistic. Shocking, right? Big if true. Anyway, getting back to your question, though, the rebuilding of the temple would not be able to happen until the Messiah. Until the Messiah comes, that's one of the things that we're waiting for. How that happens is a matter of question. There are different opinions whether or not it'll be having to be rebuilt literally, brick by brick, or will there is something that will come down. I believe that there is one of the books of prophets, and I don't remember which one, so I apologize. I'm going to guess Ezekiel, but that is really not a very confident guess, that talks about a temple in heaven, which apparently will come down. My feeling and what happens in that eschatological times, who knows? And, maybe I'll be around for it. God willing, I will be. And, we'll just, if that happens, then I'll be here and I'll be able to tell you. If not, we'll just have to, the landing scene from Stargate. Yes. I assume you're talking about the movie, but really they're all the same. Okay. Interesting stuff that Roland Emmerich, whatever his name is, that produced Emmerich, yes, talked about at Comic-Con, but that's about Stargate, but that's for a different podcast. So anyhow, but that's the problem here. Yeah, Emmerich is a little bit of a wackadoo. I do agree with you, but again, that's for a different podcast altogether. Maybe we'll do that, the Jews and science fiction one that I keep promising to do, which I really do want to do. Maybe we'll do it next week. Anyhow, so, we don't really know how the temple is going to be rebuilt. We do know that it has to wait for the Messiah and for that process to happen in order for the third temple to be rebuilt. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? How do you know the guy is the guy? Oh, yes. This is a wonderful question. How do you know that the Messiah is actually the Messiah? There's an inside. I think the building is literal as opposed to metaphorical. I'll get back to the first question in a second. Really, I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't necessarily, concern myself with until we get there. And so it could be a literal rebuilding. It could be a metaphorical rebuilding. Does it matter? I don't know. I don't think it does. So I'll wait till it happens. Maybe, God willing, I'll be, still be alive. Hopefully the Messiah will come tomorrow, and I'll be alive and be able to see what goes on. I don't know more than that. I'm actually, there's, Maimonides in his law books, says, basically, he talks about the Messiah, and he says, there are a lot of signs given, but we're not going to really know the signs, what the signs were, and that this was actually a sign until it actually happens. And the Messiah comes, and then we could go back and say, oh yeah, this was this and this and this. So I wait for it to happen, and we'll see what goes on at that point. And how do you know the guy is the guy? Again, I'm going to, Maimonides talks about this in his books of law that he put together, and he talks about certain signs that there are. What those actually mean, again, we don't know. There are certain signs that are supposed to be in terms of what the generations are like, and we seem to be getting to that where the generations are both going to be returning, and those that don't want to return are just going to say, forget about it. It's hard to say. There is a joke, a little bit of a joke, where the Messiah does show up, and the religious Zionist Jews say, I don't like him because he's a ultra orthodox. The ultra orthodox say, I don't like him because he's a religious Zionist. And this and everybody and these Jews say, I don't like him because he's this. And right, so we'll have to see. Who knows? But God willing, it should be soon. That's the bottom line with that. Any other questions? Okay, just wanted to check how we're doing on time over here. We're at 29 minutes. That's good. It'll probably be a little shorter when it gets done because I'm taking out all the silence. Okay, so now let's go to the third, the final piece today, which is talking about Jewish jurisprudence. Now, like I mentioned in the last, when we talked about this news article, you're not allowed to go and come onto the Temple Mount in an impure state. So the question is, what is the punishment of that? So the punishment for that is, if I'm not mistaken, is death. But but how does that happen, right? How does a court case, melted face? No, that's only if you look at the Ark. Sorry, that's in a documentary. I know that's true. So anyhow, for those of you who don't understand, I'm referencing Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not really a documentary. I am making a joke. Thank you. Anyhow, so how does death? How are you punishable by that? And we see this with a lot of various commandments in the Bible. Where, let's take Sabbath observance, where if you do not keep the Sabbath, you could be punished by stoning. So how? Do you just see a guy doing something and you go ahead and start throwing stones at him? How does this work? And so, I'm calling this, thanks to the magic of AI, Law and Order Talmudic Trials. And which is the episode's title today. And what I want to talk about a little bit, and this is in the spirit of Sesame Street. This is sponsored by the letter T and the number 2. Okay, so anyhow, how does this happen, right? How do you get to the death penalty? And people don't understand this in general, and this is why I really like to make it home, beat it home. That there are so many factors which don't allow for this to happen these days, right? Number one, there has to be the Sanhedrin, the main court, which is, we'll for lack of a better term, we'll call it the Supreme Court, which is at the temple, and it's in a location at the temple. That's A. That don't exist right now because, spoiler alert, there is no temple right now. Secondly, there needs to be a couple of factors that are involved. Factor 1, there need to be 2 witnesses that see the case, that see the act happening. Factor 2, and this goes for any type of death penalty case. I'll let you draw your conclusions to what other cases I might be talking about. So that's 1. You need to have those 2 witnesses. They need to generally be seeing it at the same time and everything. Second thing that needs to go on here is that my wife just turned out the lights on me because she's leaving for the day. Thankfully, she didn't turn out everything. Sorry. But getting back to this, secondly, in addition to the 2 witnesses, what you need to have the witnesses tell this individual that if you do act X, this is liable for punishment Y. And what I mean by that is there are 4 different major types of punishments that are death penalties. So, and you have to actually know which act will get which punishment. So, for example, like I mentioned before, not being Sabbath observant, or if you do not observe the Sabbath and you violate the Sabbath, you could be punished by stoning. So the witnesses would have to say to this individual, if you do this, then you are eligible for stoning. That's part number 2 that has to happen. So part 1, you have to be easy for me to say. There have to be 2 witnesses there. Number 2, they have to warn you about said crime and its punishment. Number 3 is you have to go ahead and say, I don't care, and I am going to do it anyway. So you need all 3 of those things. And then it goes ahead. These 2 witnesses have to go to the court. Now, there are multiple, in addition to the Supreme Court, like I said, which is called the Sanhedrin, there are minor courts that are there, that are around, that are a court of 23 individuals. And they need to, they would be able to commit somebody to death. And so there is, they have to then go ahead, testify on this, and they go through a process of examination and cross-examination. And they are asked very detailed, specific information or specific questions regarding the crime. And if the court does not believe that the witnesses are telling the truth, they don't have to commit this person to or convict this person. So there's a lot of stuff that could go on. Additionally, they actually wait overnight to go ahead and determine whether or not the person is guilty or innocent. They do not make a snap decision about this. They put this off and they hold off on it, and they wait overnight to make the decision. Now, once the decision is made, it is relatively quick that this individual gets put to death. Now, another thing about this is that the death penalty in Talmudic times and in the times when there was the temple was extremely, extremely rare. In fact, the Talmud says that if a Sanhedrin, put to death one person every 70 years, it is considered a murderous court. They tried every sort of way to not commit somebody to capital punishment like that. So those are the big death penalty types of crimes that there are, and people don't understand that it doesn't mean that anybody could go ahead and just start throwing stones or take a knife and chop somebody's head off. No, that's not how it goes. There is a process to this. There is a Jewish prudence component to this that people forget about or don't necessarily know about. Now, there is an interesting difference as well between manslaughter and murder. Murder obviously is punishable by death. Manslaughter and accidental murder is not. And if the Sanhedrin declares that this was an accidental murder, this was manslaughter, what happens is, and this is fascinating because you don't see, my mind goes crazy over this, just in terms of setting up a case like this, where there is there are called cities of refuge. And if you are determined to have not killed this person purposely, it was a complete accident. The Talmud gives cases where you're going ahead and using an axe to chop something, and the axe head, while you're swinging, I think it's swinging back, it falls off. That's like an accident. That's an accident, and you will then go to a city of refuge, it's sort of like a race. It's like, you talk about this. It's just have this mind's eye vision, and you have this race where the person that accidentally committed the crime is trying to get to the city of refuge, and on the other hand, you have the person's relative who has the ability to kill this person, if he doesn't get to the city of refuge. So it's always been something in my head that's absolutely to try to witness this and try to understand it. I can't. And the person actually, okay, so those are the manslaughter cases. Have a question coming in? Exactly. It makes sense that there would be less convictions back then, considering how difficult it would be to actually nail down a murderer. Now, for lesser crimes, there are lesser crimes, and those crimes are generally, if they're of a rabbinic nature, then they would be going ahead and having lashes. They would be whipped. There would be no more than 39 lashes. They actually take a look at the individual. They examine the individual to see how many lashes they can take, and they take them. If you take a look in the Talmud, there is a process for how this happens and what goes on during this. But again, it is something that happens. And again, there need to be witnesses. There need to be the warning. The individual has to say, I don't care, I'm doing this anyway. Now, and the other question is, what if these witnesses are lying? What if they weren't around? when this happened. And they're just saying this because they don't like the guy and they want to get him in trouble and they want to get rid of him. So the Bible does talk about this. And the Bible talks about this in a case of witnesses, another set of witnesses come and say, you guys were not around at this point in time. And because you were with us the entire time, you could never have been testifying that, I'll just use the Hebrew, the Hebrew names that we use when we make up these cases. You would never be there. You were never there to see that Reuven killed Shimon because you were with us at the Mets game. Nobody wants to go to the Yankees games anymore because they're not that good right now. But, you weren't around. You could never have seen such a thing happen. So you could never have testified about that. And if it turns out to be true that they actually were lying and falsified, then what happens is that these witnesses would actually wind up getting the punishment that they wanted to give this individual. So those are a couple of things and a quick overview about law and order Talmudic trials. I really wish I could put in a sound effect here. All right, question. The Sanhedrin and death penalties. This is all pre-diaspora before the temple was destroyed. Correct. Yes. This stopped before 70 CE when the second temple was destroyed. Okay, so another question coming in. There were not attempts to reinstitute this, kind of like Shiara law today. No, there were not. Now, although I will say, mostly there were not. Although I will say that there were individuals who wanted to try to reconstitute the Sanhedrin, but those are edge cases and not really people. That's not the majority of the great rabbis. No, there was very, very little attempt. And again, even if there were a Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin has to be at the location, or the major Sanhedrin of 71 has to be at the location of the temple in order to do this. So you need kind of this dual nature and dual thing, which you don't necessarily, which you wouldn't have, even if they tried to do it and reinstitute a Sanhedrin today, it wouldn't do much. Any other questions? Just to expand on your question, though, there are courts today which they don't handle the criminal side of things. However, they will handle the what's the term? I'm missing the term. It's on the tip of my tongue. But they'll handle, let's say, a civil court. Yes, civil cases, such as breaking of contracts, such as, and there was a case that I heard about recently in upstate New York, where there was a business that has been around for a very long time, and they're up in this area of in upstate New York throughout the duration of the year, and a big chain store came in and opened up a store pretty much right down the block from them, and he brought them to court because there are laws with regard to not taking somebody else's business by opening up a similar place right next to them. So I don't know what happened on the outcome of that case. I don't know all of the details, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But, they do handle these cases. Now, the thing here is that they're more considered like arbitration, and they actually do sign a contract where with the court saying that this is just arbitration, and this is binding arbitration, but it is arbitration. Okay, so no more questions. I think that is with that. What we will do is we will call this a episode, and like I said, this has been the episode Law and Order Talmudic Trials. And I would like to once again thank the moderators of the unofficial Fifth Column podcast Discord server. And once again, I ask you all, I feel like I'm Bernie Sanders here. Once again, I am asking you to come up with a better acronym so I could say something a lot easier. Also, I'd like to thank Logan for the theme music. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so. You'd like to click like on your YouTube, please do so. You'd like to join us at notarabbi.substack.com. You can sign up for getting a notice about the email and or about the podcast and about anything else that I may publish over there. Thank you very much, everybody. And as always, I am Aaron Benedict, and I am not a rabbi.